written notes. Because I don't know what evil rumours you guys have heard.
Alright, we're on.
HSC is not going to be online for at least a decade. Probably longer. They're not even talking about it. So the more practice you get handwriting, the better.
What?
You're laughing at your face.
Yeah. It's awesome.
Okay. Hopefully it's going to fit all of you. Gentlemen, we start?
Yeah, let's go.
Start recording?
Yeah,
Okay.
recording.
Thank you for the invitation. Pronounced Diamadas. I lecture at a teach at another GPS school, which is where Sir found me. I also did one of the summer courses here for Ancient and Modern in January. But the main reason I got invited is because I lecture in genocide studies at UTS. So this stuff's right up my alley. Yes, it's about as dark as it gets in human history, in the human experience. On the way over, I was talking with Mr. Bragg about what you guys have actually done so far. You've done what is history. How far into, what do you guys remember from, because of course you guys are all in holiday mode now. That's why you're here in class. What have you done of the Spain and the Aztecs case study? What do you remember? Just don't worry about raising hands, just let it out.
We looked at the different debates associated with the Black Legend, and we've looked at the invasion of Spain into the into the Aztec Empire, but we haven't really got to the. We've popped up a few names of historians, but we're yet to really get into historiography.
We've done a lot of
the reasons for the
conquest. So we did a lot of the reconquest of Spain.
Okay, so you've done a bit of Reconquista, the Inquisition, beginning of the Inquisition, the influence of Catholicism on what happens next, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So you've pretty much covered that stuff. You've done a bit about the origins of the Aztec Empire.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah,
a little bit.
We have. Yeah.
We watched the film Blood and Flowers, and we used that over 3 or 4 lessons to unpack what they were like themselves as an empire and the position that they were in, strengths and weaknesses when the Spanish arrived.
Because most of what I'll be talking about, because I assume you'd be roughly that far in,
Yep.
considering your trials are how far into next term? We're week 5. So yeah, I guesstimated most of what we're going to be doing is this.
Yeah.
All right, how they actually conquered, how they colonized, what were the impacts. Now, is this a history class?
No.
What is it?
It's a
What's historiography quickly?
How construction issues change over time.
So what we're looking at for the next hour and a half-ish, a bit less, how has the history of the conquest and the colonization been written? What sources have they used? Now, who's they? Any historians we're talking about? Now, it's going to be a little bit, so I'll skip this early stuff because you guys have done it. So particularly we're looking at changing interpretations, especially popular interpretations. An interesting case study. Why? The interpretations don't really change for about 300 years. What century does the conquest actually happen?
16, no, 15.
16th, 1500s. Well, I think one behind. 1492, Columbus sails the ocean blue. A few years later, some guys arrive, begin the conquest, which really Columbus had already started. Also, the year of what? Very important year for that. 1492, 3 major things happen. One, you've already looked at. The Reconquista is completed. 2, Columbus. 3, now kudos for anyone who can pick this one up. It's the 3rd event that happened that year. What did Isabella and Ferdinand do apart from send Columbus on his
They
way?
got married,
Come on.
joined monarchs.
What about it? They kicked somebody out of Spain.
The Muslims.
The Moors.
The Moors.
And, come on, these guys were
Looking for a
die-hard
figure,
Roman Catholics. No one who's not Roman Catholic is welcome in Spain. Who gets kicked out? The Jews.
Yeah.
That's true.
It's the Iberian expulsions. All Jews are kicked out of Spain. Now, to find the ones that are hidden, what gets kicked off? The Inquisition. Well done. Only later does it spread to looking at heretics and things. The initial aim of the Inquisition was to hunt out any hidden Jews. Okay, now let's focus on that's a sideline. But it sets up for what happens next. What is the main impact, just very broadly, on Mexico of the conquest? What's the first thing these guys went after? Apart from political power, gold, and the rest of it. The Aztec religion. Yeah? The spread of Catholicism was integral to this plan. Alright. Amazing when you consider the size of the Aztec Empire was roughly 10 times the size, in terms of population, of Spain itself. So there's a number of factors that we look at as to what happened. Why was it so quick? When you think about it, it was very, very quick. How many of you do modern? Right. What option are you guys doing for modern? What historical conflict study?
Oh, Indochina.
Indochina. What's the main French problem with Indochina?
Religion.
Loss of national pride from beaten by the.
No, why did they get beaten is my point. Militarily, from a military point of view.
Nationalism.
Because
The French, not what the Vietnamese were doing. What was the French main problem? Their supply lines were ridiculously stretched. Where's France? Even today, it's a 12-hour flight. So back in the days of ships, it's a couple of months on the sea to resupply your garrisons. Spain had the same problem. Spain's the other side of the Atlantic. And yet they still conquered very quickly and very effectively. What does this tell us about the nature of the Aztec Empire? How much of an empire was it? Just from a purely military point of view, think about it.
they'd only really faced other tribes in their area. They hadn't really faced military powers. So it sort of depends on how much of a pushover the other tribes were.
Point number one. Point two. Once they pushed them over and ruled them, how much were they interested? How interested were the Aztecs in absorbing the other peoples? Because the Spanish, that's what they were on about, weren't they? The homogenization of their empire. French, less so. The English were the best at it. Now, just look at Australia. Come on. Were the Aztecs interested in homogenizing their empire?
No.
Making everybody Aztec? Of course not. Did not give a rat's. Why?
They captured them as war prisoners, didn't they?
You run out of your supplies of sacrifices if you make them all Aztecs.
They still sacrificed Aztecs. But on the whole, it was mainly.
On the whole, it was mainly
Okay.
the ones that would be for the Aztec, from my understanding, the Aztec ones would be generally like the child sacrifices, a bit like the Incas.
Okay.
But their main source, especially the ones for the war god, were warriors. You're not going to sacrifice your own army. All right. Number of factors that we just talked about. One, how much of an empire were the Aztecs in our terms? Two, the big advantage the Spanish had was technology. Spanish had steel, armour, cavalry, which the Aztecs initially misinterpreted as deer. How do we know this? How do we know they misinterpreted them as deer without antlers? How would we know this? Come on.
Written Aztecs.
We do have Aztec sources. There are some Aztec sources that survived the conquest. And we'll talk about them today. And thanks to the internet, we have access to these sources. Above all, what is the point of Spanish warfare? This is probably the number one factor. What is the point of Aztec warfare?
Capture.
What's the point of Spanish warfare?
To kill.
To kill. Completely different approaches to war. The Aztecs' aim was to capture their enemy for sacrifice. The point of the Spanish is to, hey, you stand against me, you're dead meat. Very different approaches. Then you put in everything else. So there's a combination of factors as to why the Aztecs were collapsed straight away. Pretty much. All right, introduced diseases played a role. For that one, look at a source, which it's on the document that I've given Mr. Bragg, a thing called American Holocaust by David Stannard, who is Native American himself. It's about 500 pages long, so pick and choose the relevant Aztec bits. But it is very, very, very dark reading. A lot of it focuses on the roles that introduced diseases played. Diseases introduced deliberately as well as accidentally. The Spanish did not think in terms of deliberately introducing diseases. Why not? The Spanish did not think in terms of deliberately introduced diseases. Did they understand it? Did they have any concept of smallpox, flu, cholera, etc.? They knew they were diseases, but did they have any idea of how to treat them? They basically used leeches for everything. Their medical knowledge was quite below. Right. But the diseases were still introduced. They were brought on the ships, both by the guys as well as, because there were no girls on the ships, yeah?
Animals.
The animals. Particularly which animal?
The goat. Goat? Goat.
Rats.
Rats.
Rats. Specifically the fleas and the ticks and the things on the rats were the biggest culprits. Alright. Our first source, don't worry sir, has got this PowerPoint. He will put it up on your intranet. What do you guys call it?
Online classroom.
Online classroom?
Pipeline.
I know different schools have different names for it. Number one source for the conquest is Cortez himself. He actually wrote a story of what the conquest was. This is based on a portrait by Titian. Anybody who does art would know that name. Famous Italian painter of the period. So for this guy to get his portrait done by Titian after the conquest, he's pretty well off. Starts off as a, literally, how did he start off? How did Cortez start off life? He was about as poor as they come. Even today, Extremadura is known as a very underdeveloped part of Spain. It's right up in the plateau. It's not particularly, it doesn't have very good farmland. It's not on the coast for the tourists. It's pretty isolated and not very wealthy. So he goes across the New World 1504, only 12 years after Columbus. Number one point for him was money. Where it says he went to the New World, where did he go? What was the Spanish New World?
The Americas.
What we now call Cuba. what they called. What was the Spanish name for it? Oh, come on, they're Spanish. Thank you. Hispaniola.
Could have guessed that, yeah.
That's why I said, hey, they're Spanish. Guys, one thing I recommend you do. I've marked HSE ancient and modern. I haven't marked extension. It's a very closed shop. Very difficult. Very difficult to break into that little clique. Use the names in their contexts. So if you're talking about this period, don't use words like nation or nationalism. These do not exist yet. These concepts are about 200 years away.
It's wrong, bro.
Need a drink? There's one right there. Tribes, peoples, lands, empires, countries, etc. Avoid modern words. We call it Cuba, sure. It looks also impressive, but also breaks up the text when you use the names that they used. So the island of Hispaniola. Okay. He landed in what is now Veracruz. Right, on the Caribbean coast of Mexico, 1518. We're still only a few years after the, quote, discovery of the New World. All right. Map of the route. History of the conquest of Mexico by the Spaniards. Virtually the whole book is available online. Google knows all. What's important about this book?
Primary source.
It's not quite primary. When does the conquest happen? 1500s, around 1520. 1518, 1522. 1684. But it's a very early interpretation, isn't it, of the conquest from a Spaniard. Is he going to bag his own guys? No, unlikely.
It's at the time of the Armada, isn't it? So he wouldn't be bagging them at all. He'd be very nationalistic.
All right. Yes, you know the time of the Armada. What happens to the Armada? What is the Armada?
Knowing that
England and Queen
Attempted invasion of England,
they all smashed up their boats on the rocks, isn't it?
which is why you get a number of Irishmen that have Spanish names. Peter Costello.
That's Spanish, yeah.
Costello.
Costello.
Certainly not Irish.
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to say De Valera, but he's half Cuban. There are a number of them. Why? They lost the battle in the English Channel. They went around the top of Scotland. Rather than retreat backwards, just where the English were, they cut them off. Got smashed up off the coast of Ireland. A number of the shipwrecked sailors married Irish girls. Why? The Irish were Catholic too. All right. 1519. Depiction. And a lot of the sources we use are images. Why?
Because less people were literate back in the day.
Come on.
People had never seen anything like it before.
Which people?
The Spaniards,
Also,
the Europeans,
the Aztecs.
of course.
What was Aztec writing?
foreign.
Hieroglyphics.
Hieroglyphics, pictures. Pictograms is more accurate.
Okay.
What's a pictogram to that? Is that
Like,
just a picture?
Pictures. I'll show you some examples shortly. Okay, they meet on a causeway, not actually in the city. Now, I don't know if anybody's been to Mexico City. I haven't. Today it's just this big bowl. All right, that's why it's one of the world's most polluted cities. That bowl used to be a lake. The island was in the middle of the lake. So they linked it with the mainland with a number of causes or causeways. Different sources say 5 or 6. Basically, bridges. It's in the middle of one of these bridges. So straight away, why doesn't Moctezuma or Montezuma, depending on your source, why doesn't he meet them in his palace, sitting on his throne? Why does he go outside the city to meet these strangers?
Because they're strangers.
You meet strangers before. You have embassies, don't you?
Is it the vision?
This is one of the historiographical points. Is it the religious belief that Hernan Cortes is the reincarnation of Quetzalcoatl? Is it because they are strangers that suss them out? We actually don't know. It's one of these points of debate. Why did they receive them in this way? Okay. The solaces, again, gives rather accurate depictions, descriptions of the dress. They played on the feathers. Now these birds that formed the crown, the headdress, where are they found? Far to the south of what we now call Central America. Guatemala, Belize, tropical jungles. Long way from Mexico City, from Tenochtitlan. Why was it called? You guys know? Anybody remember why it's called Tenochtitlan? How did the Aztecs come to be here?
Well, yeah, they were a northern tribe who came down and found an abandoned city.
Did
They
they
followed
fly?
a cactus. They were looking for some sort of cactus.
That was a bird.
Was it a bird
It
or a
was,
cactus?
it was an eagle eating a snake on a cactus,
Yeah, that's it.
which is
They
today.
didn't
Where?
actually see that.
Where do you find that symbol today? On the Mexican
The
flag.
Mexican flag, yeah.
It's on the Mexican flag.
Yeah, so they went and built a city beside a lake close to where they found the ancient ruins.
All right. It's called Tenochtitlan because the leader of this tribe on this big trek is Tenoch. The name literally means Tenoch's island or land. Okay. We have from the descriptions artwork like this. Do the buildings look very Mesoamerican, to use a technical phrase? What do they look like?
Spanish.
Don't they? Very Renaissance. So a lot of these European images are made to fit European ideas. They are reinterpreting things in their own way, are they not? How many of these old images do you have of Jesus being swarthy, dark hair, long beard? Most images of Jesus from Western European sources are what? How does he look?
White.
He looks white, light brown or blonde hair, blue eyes generally. The guy was a first century Jew. Do you think he was going to be blonde, fair-skinned and blue-eyed? Odds are not. Point. That it is reinterpretation to suit the cultures. The Aztecs do this as well. And the Jesus bit plays a big role. Why? Think about it. What does Jesus do? What happens to him?
Sacrifice.
Sorry?
He's sacrificed
Sacrifices what?
For us and
his life.
Himself.
Self-sacrifice.
Self-sacrifice. What do the Aztecs do before Christianity arrives?
Sacrifice.
Sacrifice to others. Can you see the appeal to the Aztecs of Catholicism,
Did they
of Christianity?
Did they do self-sacrifice as well before?
In a way, yes. Not human sacrifice.
Just
They
blood
would-
mothers.
they would get
stabbed
them.
us, yeah.
But blood played a very important role in their religion. Still does with ours, except not literally anymore. Well, in my tradition, we are taught that it actually does, through the prayers and things, becomes actually the blood of Christ, which kind of makes us cannibals, which is interesting. Let's not go there. Can you see the appeal, though, of this concept of the God sacrificing himself for you, rather than the other way around? So the Aztecs, and this is a big point of debate, how willing were the Aztecs, because of this imagery of the self-sacrificing God, to accept Catholicism?
Can I ask a question?
Please do.
When the Aztecs conquered other tribes, they were welcoming of homogenizing their religions. Because they certainly, when they arrived at the lake, they found the idol, and they certainly based their religion off that. So I was just wondering if that would, if they had been more welcome to appropriating other tribes' religions into theirs, that maybe that would also play a part into welcoming Catholicism, or not welcoming Catholicism.
Point one, we know very little about that point, from the Aztec point of view, or from other tribes' point of view. Point two, they almost definitely did absorb some other elements from the other peoples around them. Why?
So it wasn't their land.
Wasn't their land. Therefore, what was also not theirs when they got there. There's a reason the Aztecs were given Tenochtitlan. It was covered in poisonous snakes. See, what the people who kicked them off onto this bit of island in the middle of the lake didn't know is that poisonous snakes were part of their diet. They loved them. The Aztecs would actually eat them, actually wipe them out by eating them. Not like St. Patrick who kicked them all out of the island. What was already there? Anybody heard of a place called Teotihuacan?
Yeah. Yep.
Anybody? Come on. All of you must have watched Apocalypto.
Nope.
No? Wow.
Yeah, it's
Historically, really dodgy.
yeah.
But what's it supposed to be about? What's it supposed to be about? Which group? Which people?
Maya.
The Maya. Also predating the Aztecs. Right, the basic Maya religious structure is a what? What shape is it? Bit of mathematics, bit of geometry.
Triangle, pyramid.
It's a pyramid. It's a number of triangles. It's a pyramid. Did the Aztecs, when they moved in, adopted the pyramid shapes with the temple on top? Spanish then go, oh, wonderful, building materials. Pull the pyramids apart and build cathedrals. Hey, if the stone's already cut, why not just reuse it? Okay, so we know, I'm waffling, I want to move on a bit, from reliefs, from Aztec sculptures, as well as from Aztec paintings, drawings. Okay, the writing is later, we'll talk about that writing in a second, but the imagery is Aztec. So we cross-reference to get what they actually looked like, what they dressed like, what they ate. Now this is an online, I've got the URL at the bottom of this presentation, online exhibition called Imagining Mexico. Museums are playing a leading role in this reinterpretation of the conquest, especially the reinterpretation of the effects, the impact of the conquest. All right, gets there 1521. I'm going to skip the history because you already know it. Rich legacy of texts, yada, yada, yada. We also have some maps. But look, as early as the 1600s, so within a century, we already have reinterpretations happening. We have people going there. Humboldt in the 1800s. Where are these places? Where are these, not just the natural features, but also people where they actually live? We're going to erase, you guys can look at this stuff yourselves later. So there is an interest in the Spanish-speaking world on what is out there. But it's only quite late that the English-speaking world gets into it. Now, probably the beginning of the historiography of the Spanish conquest is the Codex Mendoza. 1830s, 1840s. Now, it's very, very interesting. Why? It's an Aztec document. It's done by them.
1540s, you say? 1540s.
Late 1530s, early 1540s. We don't actually have an exact year. So it probably would have taken a couple of years to produce. The whole thing's available online at the Bodleian Library in Oxford. They've got the original. All right. It talks about daily life. It talks about the people they conquered. Now look at it. A list of the tribute paid by the conquered. How much of an empire was the Aztec Empire? Was it Nazi style, we rule the whole place? Or was it more British style where you guys pay us, we take care of security, but basically you run your own lives? The evidence that we're getting is really showing that it's more British style an empire, far more than the hard, rigid Russian or Nazi style. Okay. Aztec, and I'll show you some, I think I've got some, I've included some pieces of it. If you just Google Codex Mendoza Bodleian into Google, it'll take you to the actual site where you actually get to see the pages of it. Okay, it's been at Oxford since 1659, so basically since it reached Europe. This is the original copy. So we've got some of the earliest books about the conquest of the Aztecs from Aztecs. So, where's the thing been? It's been sitting there. Why could we not touch it? Why could we not use it? Why could we not read it?
We didn't understand the idioms.
We didn't decipher them until, think about it. I said at the beginning, I started off with 300 years, roughly, the historiography of the conquest has not changed. Spanish good, civilizing the barbarians.
Like the last 30 years.
A little bit more than that, yeah, it's about the last 40. Now, think back to year 10, long time ago for you guys. What's one of the topics we did with Aboriginal studies in year 10? 1950s, 1960s.
Rights.
Civil rights. Now, civil rights was not restricted to African Americans or to Aboriginals in Australia. Civil rights movement also kicked off in Latin America. For who?
Is it because of cultural relativism?
The indigenous peoples, yes. All right. The indigenous people started reasserting their own identities, copying the African Americans, just like we did. The Aboriginal people here, their leaders, particularly Charlie Perkins and a few others. Anybody into football? You really should see some of his early footage of his early play. Absolutely amazing footballer. Football, you know, with your feet, yeah, not AFL, not rugby. Charlie Perkins.
Billy Baker.
He ended up playing for Everton eventually. Would have played for Australia except he had one real issue. He was black. And that is the only reason he was not picked for Australia. Because it's 1950s, before he went to uni. What were Aboriginal people in the 1950s?
Not citizens.
They weren't even human. In the census, the farmers would be asked, how many cows, how many sheep, and how many blacks? Seriously. So he couldn't play for
They were
Australia.
flora and fauna.
They were flora and fauna until 67,
Yeah.
when they were recognised as people in the census,
Yeah.
and then next step became citizenship, etc., etc.
How have the boys discussed that sort of change in
A contextual.
academia, or what's how's the best way for me to describe the movement of the 1960s, which led to a revisionist in historiography.
It started with political rights. It came out of, especially out of World War II, where would African Americans fight in World War II?
In the front line.
Along with whites. So a lot of the poor white boys were seeing that the poor black boys are, well, they bleed the same way we do, they die the same way we do, they kill the same way we do. It really, World War II is when this racial stereotype started to break down. And out of the political push for civil rights, you started to get the cultural revival, cultural renaissance. To put it into a Scottish context, the Gaelic revival of the 1800s. I don't know how much you guys look at that at all. When the English conquered Scotland, one of the first things they did was ban things like what? The kilt, the bagpipe, the Gaelic language. Why? These are uniquely Scottish. These were the reasons that Scots would, this is a big sideline, Scots would revolt against English, wouldn't they? So we banned them. So 1800s, we have what is called the Gaelic revival. They start playing Gaelic games again, Gaelic football, particularly. Start wearing the kilt, start having Gaelic classes, reviving the language. Similar things happen about 100 years later in Central America. Were the Aztecs wiped out?
Close to guess.
What do you guys think?
Not all of them.
Apart from the warriors and the ones who died of disease, the ones who survived the diseases.
Did some of the Spanish soldiers marry or like Aztec women so that the bloodline was like carried through?
Yeah, but then it's still not pure Aztec, are they?
Define purity.
Straight up.
Double marriage of Aztecs. They become Mexicans. Essentially.
They became Mexica. What's the Aztecs' greatest contribution to our civilization? Translate that into English.
Chocolate.
These guys invented chocolate.
Yes.
What?
Bring up chocolate in the essay. Like a
Well, if it comes up, if you can. One of the things that is very little understood and very little examined is the impact of food on the impact afterwards, on the consequences of colonization. Apart from Mexico, and let's look at the whole of Latin America, what we now call Latin America. What was the impact on Europe?
no.
Well, there's always an impact.
Money. Lots of money.
Lots of money, okay? Get your head out of the stock market. What were they making money on?
Gold.
Yeah, they shipped out the gold very quickly. There wasn't much left.
Land. Crop.
Coca beans.
Chocolate.
What else?
Maize.
What else? What else? Come on, keep going. Exactly.
Wait.
What are all these things, apart from tobacco? All these things are food, aren't they? Think about the European diet without chocolate. There goes Belgium and Switzerland and most of Austria. Without potatoes. No hot chips. Disgusting. Imagine the diet without chips.
Yeah, I'd be terrible. It'll be good.
Imagine the diet without tomatoes.
90% water.
You haven't had a real tomato then. Not the hydroponic crap we eat here in Australia. Tomatoes are from Mexico. Beans. Paprika.
Spices.
Spices. Chilies. No hot and spicy chicken. Think about when you talk about the impact, the consequences of the conquest, depending on the source you get, but think about what was the impact on Europe. Very understudied part of colonization in general is the impact on Europe of all this food. But just think about the list we just did now. Our diet today, that's a good chunk of our diet. Especially potatoes, tomatoes, tomato sauce, tomato soup, etc., etc. All right. Really got to move along. Okay. Skip these bits. You can look at these yourselves, different images and drawings from the 1500s of Tenochtitlan. We get very little drawing of stuff apart from Tenochtitlan. The idea of an island in the middle of a lake with causeways, with champas. What are champas?
Are those the gardens?
That's the ones. Floating gardens. It's a lake, so there's plenty of reeds. Cut the reeds, stack them up, put some mud on top, floating garden. This is how they grew a lot of their food. How big do you think, taking a look at this one, taking a look at the next one, how many people lived in this city? Lowest number is 200,000. Highest I've seen is 500,000. In other words, we had no idea. But definitely a lot of people. Is the island so big that it covers, there's enough space for them all to have 1 or 2 story houses? So automatically you must have multi-story apartments. Otherwise, how are they all going to fit in? So we begin to get an image that these guys were far from barbarians. All right. The second key document, and this is really the beginning of all historiography, is Diaz's account, which has been translated into English, also available through Google. Now, he wrote this about 50 years after the conquest, so now we're talking about the 1570s. One of the things he says, and this is very interesting, he wants to correct errors in earlier accounts. What does that mean? Historiography.
Did he actually
Change
say that?
interpretation. He actually says it.
Don't quote.
Oh, paraphrase, not quote. You can find the exact quote if you look up his book, which, as I said, exists in English.
Yeah.
Penguin's got a copy of it, has got an edition of it. 1570s. Some of the conquistadores are still alive. He's one of them. He's not just a historian. What does he do? How would he know to correct Cortez's mistakes?
He was there.
He was there.
When he says he aims to correct what he saw as errors in earlier accounts, does he specifically mention Hernan and Cortez?
Yes.
Does he mention any other accounts?
I haven't read it.
Okay.
I'm going off what other people have written about. I've never taught this particular unit. When I do extension, my favourite is the Crusades. Simply because it sets up so much of the modern world. What does Sunni, Shia, Catholic, Protestant doesn't exist yet, Orthodox, etc. Sorry.
Yeah.
All the modern fighting in the Middle East is set up by this. The boys. Okay, I'll show, it's on the next slide, but there is a version published later, as it says, the great temple, Templo Mayor, as you'll also see it. It's shown like a ziggurat, one of these Babylonian things. Why? Because we're basically, this is out of his book. Right, there's the island. The lake is, notice it's kind of changed shape a bit. And there's the Temple Mayor. This bit is a quote. Sorry, 1560. Many soldiers were dissatisfied with their share of gold, etc., etc. They wanted gold, they wanted mines, etc., etc. The more we have, the more we want. Why would he write something like that?
Is he critiquing?
Very much so, isn't he? Listen to the words. Now all men alike covet gold, and the more we have, the more we want. What's he critiquing?
The greediness of Spanish.
The greatness of human
Definitely.
beings. All men alike. Doesn't say Spanish. If you're a guy, you're greedy. You notice, if you want to take it literally, he's talking about guys. But more generally, he's talking about human beings. But he wouldn't write the word women, why bother? Who cares? They're only there to make babies, aren't they?
Yeah, true.
We have very few female historiographers, pre-20th century. All right, that's actually him there. Portrait of him again. You look at the portrait, look at the drawing. What do you see? He was a soldier of fortune. He was a mercenary, so not very well off. What did he finish life as? Look at the clothes.
An upper, like high class.
Very much an upper class gentleman, authority figure. Educated enough that he wrote his own story.
Because we've seen two people like this, can we assume that everyone who came back?
No.
No, I'm just.
Some did, some didn't.
Not everyone's going to be rich.
But this is it's a great point. It's a great point. Think about it.
Well, it depends how much they shed the loot.
Very good. What else does this tell us about history?
Written by the world.
You two. What else does this tell us about history? Both Cortez and Diaz now have portraits. History is always written by the wealthy until really the 20th century. Especially the 21st century. You guys write history every single day. And I'm not talking about away from school. Where do you guys write history? Facebook. Who does not have a Facebook account? Exactly. Do you not write stuff on there? Stuff as mundane and as annoying as bored now. Or something as profound as, you know, this is a great article that you should read.
Like history today compared to like if someone was to get a full-on account of an individual today, it'd take about an hour. Whereas like with these, it's taken us 400
For
years.
like one event.
But that's only technology. That's it. That's the only difference.
Yeah.
All right. How many of you do ancient? Have you looked at Pompeii graffiti?
Yes.
Yeah.
Facebook.
Yep.
Isn't it? It's literally the Facebook of 2,000 years ago. The same crap you'll see on toilet walls or on people's walls at stores and things. Today, you see it in Pompeii. They even have the same drawings without needing to go into details. Okay. We also get, at this time, again, still we're in the 1500s. Why am I sticking so much to this early stuff?
Because that's all that happens in 300 years.
Until the 1960s, that's all there is. It's repetition of these guys.
Until the 1960s.
Prescott comes into it in a few minutes. But Prescott's using these guys. So the points, the conquistadors were good guys and blah, 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 all this comes through. And I'm going to finish today, really got to speed up, with some archaeology. Because archaeology, above all, is what's changing our interpretation, especially the last 10 years. Okay. Here is where we actually get reference to original sources. He actually saw them before the Inquisition burned them, and others. And again, it's only because of references in others to his work, almost all of it was lost. Now,
So this is Castella's.
no, this is Dr. Vada, Franciscan missionary. Not being a Catholic school, you're not sure how aware you are of the different orders, different types of Catholic. So, Franciscans are, at this time, them and the Dominicans ran the Inquisition, so they were the dominant groups. The group that I worked for, the Jesuits, were not quite, they were just beginning to be formed around this time. So I just gave away what GPS school I teach at. Riverview.
Didn't really know that. Like,
I don't know, did you?
I didn't say that.
I,
The,
I
same,
have.
Oh, was even.
the original copies were all lost in 1615. So does that mean that the copy we have in 1723 is like a translation or something?
A copy of a copy.
Yeah, I knew that.
Because do we have printing?
No.
Yes, we do.
Oh yeah, but it's a.
But not in the New World. Only in Europe. Okay. There's a map again, etc., etc. It's interesting though, with the Enlightenment, now it's starting to change a little bit. What changes about the historiography of the conquest with the Enlightenment? We actually care about what the Aztecs were like before the conquest. Historiographers start actually looking at what was their world like before we took over. Don't think this is a big movement, right? This is a couple of dozen individuals. This is one of the things with the Enlightenment. We start to look at things in different ways.
Yeah, like that more kind of emotional appeal to pre-Aztec.
The world we lost, aren't they noble? The noble savage sort of approach. Okay, now what am I up to? I don't even know what I'm up to. All right. One of the things, the amazing things, is the calendar stone. Okay. The calendar stone is exactly what it says. It's the Aztec calendar of 260 days in their year. Aztec sculpture reproduced. The original is now in the National Museum of Mexico, in Mexico City. Rediscovered in 1790, archaeology. Archaeology as a science is very recent, only a couple hundred years old. Before that it was just looting. Oh, that statue looks good, I'll take it home. Nobody gave a crap about the context, where it was found, who made it, why was it made, etc., etc. It's actually huge.
What's significant about the stone?
What do you guys tell me?
Religion.
Tells us about their calendar, their religion, yes.
Astrology.
Definitely they study the
Like
stars.
another source for historians. Maybe like they could have, the Spanish could have influenced their calendar or something.
That they had their own calendar.
Yeah, yeah.
So the calendar stone starts telling us that these guys were not the savages. Okay?
That's
I'll
discovered
show you in a
during
second.
That's
Sorry?
discovered during the Enlightenment times.
At the beginning of the Enlightenment period, 1790.
Okay, alright.
They were basically doing foundation excavations to build something new
Yeah.
in Mexico City, and they found it. What was it doing there? How did it end up there? That's actually a drawing of it. I've not included an original. By the way, it was all painted. It wasn't just like this.
Freehand.
How big is it?
It's a Scott. Give me a photo, Google it. I don't remember offhand.
I've already
It
got
is
up.
massive. I think
I've already got it up.
it's roughly the size of this room, isn't it? How big is it? Its
The size of
dimensions.
this room.
It's massive. It is massive. Okay. This is the sort of stuff I want to get to. Okay. What do we see?
Is that Aztec people giving tribute to the Spanish?
Is it?
Or is
Who's
it the other way
seated?
around? Oh, true.
The Spanish.
Well, both are
It's
seated.
about the size of that wall, so.
Both are seated.
So flat, because it was flat.
Yeah.
It would take up most of the space.
Yeah.
Both are seated.
Who's the dominant one?
Aztec.
Right? This is what we call, this is the science of semiotics.
Signified.
This is semiotics. How do you know who the dominant person is in the conversation? Well, the one with more people behind him. So why are these guys up here in the clouds?
Watching over.
So what's all this stuff?
Barter, like stuff to trade with.
Stuff to trade or tribute.
Or to
There's
give
no
as a
words,
sign
are
of
there? So
respect.
we've got to interpret it. Right? Who's the chick?
Translator.
What's her name?
Oh,
She is absolutely crucial.
Mary.
it's not Mary.
Doña Marina.
Marina.
The Lady Marina, or the Lady Marina. So she's given the Spanish title of Doña. The guy is Don.
Yeah.
Is Don is good? Don the Godfather? Spanish. And being received by the Emperor, Montezuma. The night of tears, or the sad night. Noche, I can never remember the first second word. Triste. We'll come back to that in a minute.
Was Marina like? Did she like having that kind of status as like a authority?
She?
Huh?
Wouldn't she?
She seems like the type of like one of those women that have got to know the culture and live like the people, and then suddenly she's.
So how do we know?
Yeah, we don't.
We don't.
But if there's images of her getting praised, isn't that a suggestion that she might have been
Might have
taken
been
by
what?
the power of
First of all, who was she?
just like peasant translator?
Peasant translator, okay, so she knew a number of different languages, didn't she?
Lady Marina.
Yeah.
And she learned which crucial one to serve the Spanish. She learned Spanish.
Yeah.
What was her we don't know her motivation.
We don't know. We have, and this is one of the big holes in historiography, especially historiography of the conquest. What role did she actually play? Now, anybody who's travelled overseas and doesn't know the local language, which is probably most of you, yes? All of you have travelled somewhere you don't speak the local language? What?
Except I have.
I loved a couple of years ago, I was in Austria. I'd throw my couple of German words at them, and they thought I was a local. It was hilarious. They're like, "What German?"
They open up to you and then you're like, nah. They
Basically, they start talking full on
Yeah.
German. It's like, that's the extent of my German. That's all right. The same thing. I do the same thing in Israel. It's hilarious. But now they can tell from the way I pronounce Hebrew that you're an Anglo, even from an English-speaking country. All right. So we don't know. We know very little about her, apart from the fact that she wasn't his translator.
So were the Aztecs like a paternal society, like today, were women as prevalent?
Yes.
More prevalent than in
The women in what we know, women in Aztec society had far more prominent roles than in European society at that time. They were not just baby breeders. They had status. They could run businesses. They could have property, etc., etc. Okay. Half an hour to go. Less. Okay. So after the night of tears, the sad night, they run away from Tenochtitlan to Tlaxcala. And this is the crucial point of the conquest. This is the tipping point. We have lost a lot of men in the retreat from Tenochtitlan. How do we rebuild our forces?
Wait, so,
So
can you
why was
explain
it?
that
Yeah,
again?
can you please explain that again, sir?
Why was it a crucial point?
Yeah, you haven't
They
gone through
lost
this
them.
bit yet. No? Should have said so.
Your fault they switched off for a bit. Yeah, we got up to the point where they got into. We got up to the point where they got into.
Okay, so now this is all, the rest is all new
and
stuff.
then, yeah.
Okay.
Can I just say one thing, guys? The importance of Malinche, the article that I've given you, the Annalanian one, okay, Malinche's Ghost or Malinche's Story, okay, that's the one to read. And also the one from English and Denner, they give you really good, interesting perspective on the figure of
You
Malinche.
torture them with Inga.
Sorry?
You torture them by getting them to read Inga.
Yeah,
I love it.
Fierce and unnatural cruelty.
She's one of my colleagues at UTS. Her writing is extremely hard. Inga to Glendon, yeah.
Yeah.
Her and Eva Cox. Interesting individuals. The markers, especially the girl markers at Extension, love it when you chuck in female history, women's history. And here you've got a big opening
Does
to
Inga
do it.
mark?
No,
Oh, because that.
no, she's way above that.
Yeah,
She's way above that. Hey, you chose Extension, mate.
No, I don't care. It's
You stop, then don't whine. Not in a put down, but you write in things like, we know she played a crucial role, but because we've got nothing from her, it's all interpretation. She was obviously a really intelligent woman. She spoke at least 3 or 4 languages. She spoke her own one. She was not Aztec. Yes, we know that. She was over on the Caribbean coast of Mexico, outside the Aztec heartland. How did she communicate with the Aztecs? She must have spoken Nahuatl, the Aztec language. How did she speak with the Spanish? She learned Spanish. So she knows at least 3, probably more. This also gives us a hint about the Aztec Empire. It was quite multilingual. Think about it in terms of, to a point, Australia. The different clans, the different nations having their own languages, language groups. Mexico was very similar. Okay, so they get in. Something happens, you guys can look into it yourselves, there's no time to do it now. If I had another 2 hours, I would take a break and go more into it. Anyway, what happens is a bit of a bloodbath. Montezuma dies. Some stories will say that he died because he got hit in the head by a stone thrown by one of his own. This is, again, we have to rely on Spanish people telling us this. We have nothing from the Aztecs. Anyway, they retreat. Because they're, and this is where Diaz's quote about greed comes into it, they retreat with a lot of stolen stuff and a lot of stuff that Montezuma gave them as gifts, a lot of gold. Some of them fall off the causeway because it's at night. There's no street lighting. At night, the causeways are generally closed. So they fall into the lake and drown. So what did the Spanish do after the conquest with the lake? They drain it. So think about the environmental damage that happens. Let's move on. Anyway, about half of Cortez's army are killed in the retreat. Now what happens to them? What do we say about Aztec approach to warfare?
They captured
And
with the
sacrificed and Holy Communion.
and that is
They are eaten. Yeah. How do we know? We've found some of their bones. With cut marks on the bones, especially thigh bones. When you think about your bodies, what's the meatiest bit apart from your butt?
Quads.
So the prime cut goes to the priests.
So, I did a lot of this.
No, not a lot, but it did happen.
Did it only start
Like,
very
what's the
do we
taste
know?
of human?
Do we know if
Generally, it was barbecue.
do we know if cannibalism is a result of Catholicism entering?
No. This was pre. This was pre.
He said Holy Communion. So
Well, it was. They were sacrificed as a religious ritual, and the final part of the ritual was the ritual distribution of the sacrificial victim.
Okay.
You tenderize him by rolling him down the steps of the pyramid, then you barbecue.
All the bones.
I'm serious.
All the bones have been broken and whatnot, though. Like throwing them down. That would have been like a little bit splintered like.
I mean, your heart's ripped out, so you're dead before you even hit the first step.
No, but like just eating it, the tenderization, that's just.
That's where the chocolate sauce comes in. So anyway, what happens? The following year, they come back with tens of thousands of native allies. The conquest only happens because of the local tribes, the tribes of that the Aztecs have conquered, join the Spanish. That is the only reason the Spanish win. Sorry, rephrase that. That is the decisive factor in the Spanish winning.
So the following year they come back straight away.
So they retreat from Tenochtitlan on the night of 30th of June, 1520. August of 1521, they take the city after a 3-month siege.
Wait, sorry. So why did they retreat in the first place?
Because they were.
Outnumbered and outgunned
By the Aztecs.
by the Aztecs.
Oh.
So do you know why the Spanish killed that group of Aztecs?
That's open to interpretation.
Okay, and then
Misinterpretation of what they were doing, wanted more gold. There's a number of different stories.
and then after that happened, after that little group killed the Aztecs, they were scared and they ran, and they're like.
Well, the other Aztec warriors started attacking them.
And then they just.
And they just bailed and they died.
They bailed. Some of them died because they fell into the water. Some of them were captured.
Oh, right.
Some of them were killed in the fighting.
Yeah.
So by the time they actually got to Tlaxcala,
Oh, when they were retreating from the
Yes.
Aztecs, half of them died. Anyway.
yes. So in the retreat from here over the causeway and around to here, half the Spanish are killed or captured and then killed.
It says in the siege that they demolished the buildings. They actually took them apart.
Yes.
Is that the reason why we have so little archaeological evidence?
And that's what we'll,
Or
that's what I'll jump to in a
or
minute.
the opposite.
That's what I'll jump to in a minute. Okay, this guy's fascinating. 1620s, 1630s, so a century after the conquest. A guy called Thomas Gaze walks around the place. The New World was strictly off limits to non-Spanish subjects. How did this guy then get to go there? He was a Catholic brother, Franciscan, I think. He was a Catholic brother anyway, Catholic monk. Yeah, here's where it gets interesting. He walks around for 12 years around Mexico and Guatemala. Aztec Maya territory. Okay. Returns to England because he was English. So sickened by what he saw, he becomes a Protestant. He leaves the Catholic Church. Stays religious, stays a Christian, but changes the type of Christianity. Thomas Gage. So his version is not going to be very positive towards the Spanish, is it? What did he see, I wonder?
The Spanish seeking revenge for what happened.
Pretty much. Spanish destruction. Now I'm running out of time, so I'm going to run. There are other ones as well, other stories, but I want to get to the important bits. Well, they're all important, otherwise I wouldn't be here, but you've got other brothers, others, etc., talking about it. You'll have the beginning of early archaeology. So people wandering around, especially southern Mexico, and actually drawing temples, not just Aztec, this is actually Maya, around the Yucatan Peninsula. The Florentine Codex is another. The Codex Florentino is another very important Aztec document. 1570s, again, done by a Spanish friar. This is where we get a lot of our knowledge from. Aztec life pre-conquest.
So the Codex Mendoza, though, that's written by Aztecs?
Both of them are.
Okay,
They are
alright.
both are. They're both written by Aztecs.
Okay.
Both under Mendoza was first, then there's Florentino.
Right.
It's called Mendoza because of that's the guy who basically commissioned it. And it's called Florentino because it's found in Florence, in Italy. It also tells us not just about the religious rituals.
But their way of savouring the meat. Title.
This guy's a field surgeon, a field doctor. The warriors would have a lot of cuts and smash wounds and things. That's how they fought, yeah? What are these things?
Leeches.
Use your imagination. What are those things? It's a drawing. They need to get a message across.
Spirit. Yeah.
Breath, spirit.
Think breath, come on.
Giving the gods.
What are we doing?
Giving the gods something.
What are we doing?
Oh, getting the bad things out of your body.
Speech bubbles.
It's yelling out
Oh,
of the
what?
They're just speech
So
bubbles.
he's yelling. Like he's yelling.
So this guy's talking and this guy's talking. Different colours, different things. It's very open interpretation. So this guy says, then this guy, then this guy, then this guy. They're having a conversation. I would say interpretation is a big issue. Okay, modern historiography. Brad Hart writing about Diaz. Right, Diaz is, until basically the 1960s, the only historiography is they're all correcting each other's mistakes. In other words, they're tinkering at the edges. They're not really getting into the heart of the issue of what the hell happened.
Just up to this point, I just want to ask you, you haven't said anything about Viscassus.
Nope.
Where does he come in regards to this early historiography? Okay.
Can't cover everything in an hour and a half, basically.
Right, okay. Fine, that's something that we
That's
can
something for you guys to slot
Yeah,
in.
okay, alright.
And I'm jumping because one, I'm running out of time. Two, and I particularly want to get into since the 60s.
Okay, sorry, I'll let you get into it.
Because that's when we're really start getting interesting bit. Now, what have we got so far? We've got Aztec sources on the conquest. We've got Spanish sources on the conquest. We've got one key English source on the conquest. Thomas Gage. Now, last 30, 40 years, we start getting new interpretations of this. What is new about it? What has changed? There's the Penguin one of Diaz's book. Penguin version. What is new? What has changed? We said it before, the deciphering of Aztec written language. That is what opened up the Aztec books, the few that have survived. That's what opened up to, well, how did the Aztecs see the Spanish? Okay. Bias. And this bias, as we said before, only starts to shift in the 60s. A consequence of the civil rights movement. What bias is this? You've heard the, you must have heard, especially those who do modern. Yeah. What is the white man's burden? Always use it in inverted commas.
To look after primitive races.
Yeah, we've got to look after them. They're not really up to it. They can't look after themselves. What?
Funny.
Yeah, so to us in the 21st century, it sounds hilarious. They took it seriously. It is very paternalistic, from the Latin pater, which in English is father. The father looks after. It's basically the same as in Italian, isn't it?
When was this? Sorry, in the 60s.
This is when it starts. The shift starts in the 60s. So all the stuff beforehand, from the 1500s to the mid-1900s, 300 years, the writing comes from this point of view. All right? That we are here, we white guys, especially we Western European white guys. My lot are Southern European, so we're kind of like, not of the same scratch. We've got to look after the world from their point of view, yeah? I'm not saying I agree with it. We've got to look after them. Like a father looks after his children, looks after the family. Really, there's only shifts in the 60s. So whenever you look at this Prescott, any of the ones pre World War II, pre-1960s, keep this in the back of your mind. They're not trying to be racist. It's not a matter of racism. Racism is a very modern concept. Basically, it doesn't exist before the 1800s, 1880s, 1890s, is when the concept of race even exists. They are primitive, they are savages. Okay. Cohen wrote the introduction and oversaw the translation of Diaz's book. So, why is Cohen a good source? It's a modern source, as in the last couple of decades.
Revisionist.
And yet, how much does he revise?
Just the start.
Not much.
Nothing from that.
Exactly.
Saying exactly what Prescott did.
Exactly. Not much. So where does the real serious revision start? Starts with a Mexican historian. Starts with a guy called Garibay. Angel Maria Garibay. One of the interesting things about Latin countries, there are certain names that get switched between guys and girls. They can both have them, like Maria. Right? Prescott did not know. Prescott's 1800s. Did not have access. He saw these pictures and he goes, okay, pictures, nice. Very colourful.
He wouldn't have been able to see them though. He was blind.
Even more so. I did not know that. Alright? 1962. Mexican guy discovers the work of another Spanish friar, Bernardino de Sahagún. You also see it written as Sahagún. Alright. What is this important about this work? Think about it. How? Anybody heard of the Rosetta Stone?
Yep. Yeah.
Vas. What is it?
Yeah. It contained 3
Going.
It's got on it hieroglyphics and then a number of other different
Greek.
languages.
2. One more.
And
Hieroglyphics, Demotic, which is simplified Egyptian, and Greek. Could we read the Greek?
Yeah.
Yes. So we work backwards to decipher hieroglyphics. This friar did what? Those images we've seen from the codices, these Aztec sources, what writing did they have in our language? Spanish. Didn't use Latin letters. He developed writing for Nahuatl. No, Garibay rediscovered it. What's happening? This is again from the Codex Florentino.
Disease.
Smallpox.
Yeah. Wait, so when was this drawn?
This is 1500s. This is the Codex
That's when it
Florentino.
was drawn.
Yep.
But and when did they discover it?
Oh, we had it for a while, but nobody bothered looking at it.
Yeah.
All right.
It's not till the 60th. That's when it all gets
Yeah,
revised.
and they start looking.
And they go back to these main sources.
Okay.
Garibay, Dr. Angel Maria Garibay.
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 And spell that G-A.
Garibay. All right. Developed a written language for Aztec. So although the point, the purpose, talking about the historians and their purposes of history, the purpose of these guys that are writing is what? What's their purpose? The early ones, these Spanish friars. They're monks, they're religious people. What is their purpose? Spread Christianity, convert them to Catholicism. Fine. What was the unintended consequence of their conversion, of their work? They preserved Aztec history. Did they set out to do that? Not really. Their point was to convert them to Christianity. But by doing that, they were also recording Aztec history. Not all history, gentlemen, is deliberately written as history. Those of you who are modern people, I'm assuming you guys did Nazi Germany. 2/3 of the state does. Heard of a guy called Alfred Rosenberg?
Sounds familiar.
Sounds familiar. He was the Nazis' ideas man. His diary was only published last week. Not meant as history. It's his personal thoughts, his personal diary. But it has become history. Because it tells us what the hell was he thinking when he was writing his, what Goebbels once called it, verbal vomit. Goebbels couldn't stand it. Nazi dwarf. Translation into English now of one of these texts. Stags came forward carrying soldiers, cotton armour, leather shields, iron spears, swords hung down from the necks of the stags.
Wait, what was it?
What are the stags?
The horses.
It's actually the horses. What does it mean? The swords hung down from the necks of the stags.
In their horse.
Yeah, on the belt, but it kind of looks like
it's
it looks like it's on the horse's neck, doesn't it? Animals snort, bellow, kind of like monsters. Sweat pours in streams. You've got to love it. And there's more afterwards. But we do have, by accident more or less, Aztec interpretations of the conquest. Now, Garibay has counted more than 40 of these scripts, which is a lot more than I originally thought, before I got invited to produce this presentation today. There's the book, translated into English, Broken Spears, 2006. There's a link to the whole thing. Now, another thing, especially with this unit that you guys are doing, another problem is what? Translation. It's a science. It is really, really difficult to translate from one language to another, especially from one culture to another. Relatively easy to go from Italian to French, from German to English. Why? They're quite close. They're similar.
Have the same roots. Language roots.
What about Spanish? What about Nahuatl to Spanish? They're completely, the social construct, the society that creates this language is completely different. So whenever you quote or you paraphrase from these guys, try and throw into your responses the problems of translation. Now, there's the jump from English into from Spanish into English, not that bad. Right? There's a lot of Latin in English, but other things are things not going to change. Is it possible to not change something in the text? So No, there's even a simple one like that.
No resemblance.
There is, but it's a translation that there where the Nahuatl word has been absorbed into English and into other languages. So in French, it's become in Greek, it's socolata.
So when the Spanish went back with the food, they retained the Aztec name.
But this generally only takes with proper names. Why? We've never seen this stuff before.
Right.
We hadn't. All right? Keep the issues of translation in mind. They are a real problem. And a problem we can never deal with, we can never get over. Languages mean something specifically. All right? They are specific to their context. Now, before I wrap up, you guys can look at this yourselves.
I read that.
Excellent.
That's that horrible history thing. isn't
Yes.
Yeah.
it? Year 6. That's not year 5.
I've scanned the whole comic for you.
Oh, sweet. The horrible history is one I've
Horrible histories. Does horrible histories count as history?
Yes.
Yeah.
I must be you.
It is. All forms of history.
I despise that phrase personally, but yeah, I agree with you. It's like a girl I was helping with her extension project. She did genocide, so she found me on the web. And goes, you really are a postmodern historian. I go, huh? You use oral sources, you use people's testimonies, you interview people. How the hell is that postmodern? Herodotus did it 25 centuries ago.
Why would she even say that to you anyway? Like, what is it? By the
Trying to chuck it into the
It's
essay.
intellectual.
By the way, you're a postmodernist.
Oh, we're having a discussion about what constitutes history.
Oh.
So we're talking about, do blogs constitute history?
Yes.
Of course they do. Everything does. But although there are people who will call it postmodern, and please make sure you call it postmodern in your essays, because the markers, that's what they expect. My personal opinion is it's not very postmodern if Herodotus was doing it. Front page of his book, the histories. What does the word histories mean to you? To come back to the issue of translation. History. Histories. All right, the original is historias. It's got the H because that accent on top makes it more of a throaty rather than a lighter H. Okay. What does history mean to you guys? You can read all this stuff. Some of these, by the way, my apologies for the jokes, they are atrocious, some of them. Rotten religion, savage Spanish. Yeah.
It's a pretty good historiographical account
It is.
of Black Legend.
It is. But it's also very 21st century. I can't remember exactly when. You can Google it. I think it's 2004 or 5, something like that. It's quite recent. Now, the bones I was talking about before. Historia. The word literally means a story. Historias means stories. History is basically stories. Historiography is how these stories are written down. So what about before writing? Oral. Trojan War, the Iliad, completely oral for centuries before it's written down. Conquistadors for breakfast. This is 2006, isn't it? Yep. Archaeological experts. So forensic archaeologists. Some barbecue and some boil. Where do we get the boiling? How do we know?
Pots. We saw the image before.
We've got the bones. But how do we know that this was? How did we already know before we found these bones only 7 years ago and did our tests and things? How did we know that some of these victims were boiled?
They probably had pots. Like they probably
It showed us in one of the
archaeology-
codices.
archaeological pots.
We've got images of the head and parts of the body in the pot. Cross-referencing, using archaeology to...
Can you see in the bones that they've been boiled? Like the way?
It actually says that they have. There's an effect on the bone.
Yeah.
Right? There are cut marks. Where is it? It actually says it.
Knife cut.
There are even teeth marks on. And of course, human teeth are very different to any animal teeth.
Yeah.
So the marks are different. All right. We're still finding stuff in construction zones of like Mexico City. We're still finding massive statues like this. All right, looks much better.
Is this just stuff that the Spanish figure
Buried.
looked over in
Or that the Aztecs themselves buried. All right, this is still going on. 2007. I'm basically finished. The foundations of the Great Temple. So foundation walls and things. There's another one of these stones. Museums, and this is what I started with. Are museums not interpreting history? Think about the controversy right now about Australian curriculum. Who decides what is history? Bull.
The people
We do. Anybody, yeah, the people. Anybody involved in history is deciding what is history. This is why we're constantly changing our interpretations. All right. There's a more recent one. This is out of National Geographic. This is with the new archaeology. This is 2008, I think it was.
And that's not Tia Waddle.
That's General Shipland.
Yeah, Tenochtitlan. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do they build it on an island?
Because that's the only, because as it shows in Horrible Histories,
Yeah.
that's where they were sent out to. Because the people around the lake's edge didn't want it because it was covered in poisonous snakes.
Did they see? Was that where they saw the cactus thing, or did they see it just near the lake?
It's part of the legend, part of the myth. 2009, Treasures of the Aztecs. 2010. Dog or wolf. Sacrifices, etc. So archaeology is showing us what their lives were like, especially what their rituals were like. And that 5 minutes over, is it? Hope you guys got something out of it. I think you will.
Yeah, that's great.
It is a great study to do.
You don't really good?
Not this one, no. No, this year the boss is doing appeasement. He's got a very modern bent.
We might put this one up on the with a bunch of other things. You guys use the online classroom?
Yep. Well, yeah, we can print it off, Colin.
Yeah, well, I might, if you're going to use it, then I'll put a whole bunch of these things.
Your excuse what you're doing.
What was that thing? You said there were 3 specific sections. You said there was archaeology,
I'll do that.
museums, like you know how the different historical
Yeah.
perspectives. What were they? You said there were 2 specific ones.
Panos is trying to do the whole course in 1.5 hours.
Yes.
Ken Webb's got one section of the course, so
Yeah.
there's only so much you can
Yeah,
do.
we did the
What?
whole 94 positive was an hour and a half for one dot point. We really did like a whole course in an hour and a half.
Yeah, but in,
But as picked up on, there's a lot of stuff, especially the 1800s that I skipped.
Yeah.
And we haven't really touched on the Spanish sentiment or anything like that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I guess we did that.
An hour and a half, it's a good...
And that's very, it's really important because what happens in the 1800s?
I'm not going.
Oh.
You turned off.
Sorry. He was talking.
What happens in the 1800s
Yeah.
politically?
So
Your rise and-
Good job reading.
We've got the Enlightenment, obviously.
Yeah,
Yeah.
1800s, out of the Enlightenment,
Yeah.
nationalism,
Yeah.
the colonies start revolting and getting independence.
Yeah.
So they wanted to put their own
The
spin on
Aztec
things.
colonies.
Mexico, Brazil,
Yeah.
Peru. The first one's actually Colombia. Simon Bolivar. All right.
What were they quickly say? Just they were archaeology, hieroglyphs, and museums. It was something.
Museums.
Yeah.
And just popular, not hieroglyphs, just people's writings, popular writings.
Too easy. And these were the historiographical perspectives of the different viewing of history, like the different views that are
Some of them.
some of
Not
ones,
all,
yeah.
obviously, some of them.
And just with that, Maria Garibay, that
Angel Maria
Yeah.
Garibay, yep. Maria is his middle name. Yep.
Dr. Garibay,
Yep, easier.
was to revise Aztec revision, and he counted more than 40 manuscripts. He wrote more than 40 manuscripts.
No, he didn't write.
He
He's counted more than 40 manuscripts,
yeah,
which he has then translated into Spanish
and then that gave a different.
and given basically for the first time into a mainstream language the Aztec point of view of the conquest.
Okay,
This is Broken Spears.
Broken Spears.
Yeah, 1960s I think it was published.
cool.
The original 62.
62 is it? And then it's pre-published again 2006.
2006 in English for the first time.
Okay. So the original Broken Spears was published in Spanish, was it?
In Spanish, yeah.
Okay, so. Right.
And that's why I harped on a bit about the translation issues.
Yeah, okay, alright.
From Aztec to Spanish to English.
Thank you, sir. Thank
Welcome.
you.
Now, how do I undo?
Okay. Good one, Ollie. I'll send you out a Word doc which will guide your reading with all those readings. Okay?
Thank you.
So, yeah, you won't need to read every word, but it'll give you a guide. Alright,
iMovie is using it. Okay, so we need to close iMovie. There you go. Still going, by the way.
Oh, is it? I wonder why the other one stopped.
It's up to 137. Won't let me close.
No,
Stop.
stop.
Gotta